What was Avraham's argument against idolatry? What was Abraham's reasoning that convinced him and others that idolatry is wrong? We have to assume that everybody believed in God that early in history. Noah spoke to God, Adam and Eve spoke to God. There's no way that God was unknown. And Abraham actually was alive at the same time as Noah. Noah was old, but they were living at the same time. There's no way that people at that time didn't know about God. So, what was Avraham's contribution, revolution? What did he do? What did he say that was so different? Everybody believed in God, the creator. But they were also convinced that God is way too high, way too infinite, way too awesome to be engaged in everyday life. So after he created the world, he moved on to bigger and better things. He can't be bothered by the affairs of men. And so, if you need help in your physical, material life, you can't ask God. You have to find the power in nature that controls that particular function. The fertility god, the sun god, the thunder god. Now, Abraham came along and said, "You're wrong. The sun can't be God." Why? Because the sun has its limitation. It has its place. It has its nature. It can't shine through clouds. Clouds can block the light of the sun. Uh, it can only illuminate one half of the planet at a time. It can't shine on both sides of the planet. It doesn't dance, probably can't sing on tune. In other words, the sun is a finite, limited being with one powerful feature. Where would that limit come from? If you study nature, you discover that no thing in nature limits itself. Every limit is imposed by a stronger force. So if there's a limit on the sun didn't do it, didn't cripple itself. There's a stronger force that limits its existence, its extension, its expansion. If there is a stronger force that can limit the sun's existence, then the sun is not God. And that applies to everything in nature. Everything in nature is finite. The entire universe is only so big. So the universe, all of it, cannot be God because there's a limit on the universe and it's imposed by a stronger force, stronger than the universe. Or a little more sophisticated, nature itself has a limit, so somebody more powerful than nature imposed those limits, and that is supernatural, greater than nature. But what about the argument that God is too distant, too removed, disinterested, or uninterested in the affairs of earth? We actually have strengthened that argument or that assumption by saying that God is more powerful than nature. God is without limit, and therefore he can be described as God, whereas everything in nature is limited and therefore cannot be God. So we're saying that God is beyond all limits. Well, then why would he engage in everyday affairs? The argument is ancient. Once God gave us the Torah, once God spoke to us at Mount Sinai, we know convincingly that he does care, that he is personally involved in every event and in everything that happens in this world. Take, for example, the food that fell from heaven for 40 years while the Jews wandered in the desert. Every day, a certain amount of food fell for each family, not more, not less. Not for tomorrow, not for the day after, just one day's worth. God says, I am providing this food. He didn't say I'm going to send an angel. He didn't say I'm going to appoint somebody. When they needed water, God said, hit the rock and it'll produce water. Rocks don't produce water. So obviously, God was doing it in response to the people's complaint that there's no water. The 10 plagues, by the way, convinced even the Egyptians that God is God. How? By interfering in nature. God came down to Egypt to take the Jews out of Egypt by interrupting the forces of nature. So it all became very personal. God comes and says, you're a slave to Pharaoh? No, I need you to serve me. Meet me at Mount Sinai. We'll talk. We'll partner. We'll work out an agreement on how we can make this world better. So, yes, God is absolutely involved in every detail. And so there's no need for the sun to be a partial God. There's no need for the moon. There's no need for the forces of nature to help God run the world. And that's what we mean when we say God is both the creator of the universe and the master of the universe. The master means the mover and the shaker. So the mistake of the early idolaters was the thought that God does have a limit. He is so big, he can't be small. He is so important, he can't be bothered with unimportant. He is so infinite, he can't be finite. That's a terrible mistake because then he wouldn't be God. And yet, to this very day, there are still many people who believe that God needed an assistant, God needed a second God, a little God, a lesser God, because he himself can't be bothered. So Avram's insight, Avram's discovery, is still ahead of his time. Because even today, people are still convinced that God doesn't hear you. Talk to his vice president. The entire Torah is there to tell us that that's not the case. God says, if you do this, I am pleased. If you do the other, I am offended. I object to certain behavior. Well, obviously he cares. Obviously he's involved. There's much more to this, but it answers the question. What did Avraham tell people that convinced them to stop worshiping idols? That there's no need. God is very much involved. So if you have an ingrown toenail, you can ask God to help you, and he won't be offended. We have a Sunday night program for VIPs that you might be interested in. It's informal, it's questions and answers, it's conversation. It's really relaxed, it's really pleasant, enjoyable, informative, and kind of community-like. It's a Sunday night program. There's a Wednesday morning program for the VIPs, and there's a Wednesday night program. All of it just conversation, casual, laid back, unscripted. So join us. Take a look. Click the link below and see which of the three suits you best, and join us for some enjoyable conversation. If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic, and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there's a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it.